The champions of Europe versus the champions of Europe. Champions League winners PSG versus Europa League winners Tottenham Hotspur. 2-2 it finished in normal time and PSG winning it on penalties, coming back from 2-0 down late on to get, well, the draw and then the victory. In Thomas Frank's first outing as Spurs manager, PSG, without much of a pre-season, coming in and with a few little bumps in the road, picking up pretty much where they left off and just winning silverware. Spurs, I think, can take a lot of heart from this performance. It was a good first tryout from Thomas Frank. I mean, he won't face many tougher opposition than PSG. I mean, well, he may face PSG again in the Champions League, but I feel like it was a good test to see where he was at with the squad, and I think we saw a lot of tactical quality from him. I think there was a lot of things that will be promising for Spurs fans, and he's shown a great deal of tactical flexibility, which he did during his time at Brentford, which, especially in his first season, I think will serve him quite well in terms of getting results and getting points, while maybe not playing the overall style of football that he or Spurs fans would want. And it almost worked, almost. But when you deal with a team that's got the quality that PSG do, you sometimes just can't stop it. There is very little you can do when a team is that good. We're going to go over it now. The bulk of this game was focused on the PSG on the ball play, so that's what we're going to focus on. As you can see, it's complete man-to-man all over the pitch from Tottenham Hotspur. PSG building up in the way that they do, 4-3-3, simple as you like. They'll try and gain advantage through rotations and through fluidity and positional play, but with the aggression and the energetic nature that Spurs displayed in their pressing, it was very hard for PSG to break out against them, and they were forced long a number of times playing out to Marquinhos. The press would then start with Charlison heading into the box, or kudos on Pacho. Could play out the odd time, but it was very rare, especially in that first half where they could gain territory. It was mostly through long balls and maybe winning throw-ins or set pieces around that they could just sort of push Spurs back. But very, very good from Spurs aggressive. Sarr coming up from the deeper base in the midfield to block Vitinha. We know how much Vitinha likes to control possession. In that middle area of the pitch, if you can get through, you can find those angles to break a team down. And Sarr did a fantastic job throughout this game, especially. I thought he was the best player on the pitch. But preventing Vitinha from getting on the ball in those deeper build-up stages was key. Even when that front three tried to drop in for PSG and help assist the build-up, they would still have answers for him. So if Kvaratskhelia dropped in here, you'd get Van de Ven coming up with him, likewise with Danso and Barcola on the opposite side, which didn't happen as much because Barcola would look to receive the ball in behind as opposed to feet, where Kvaratskhelia is at his best. Dembele as well, we know how much he likes to drop in. He could be tracked by Romero. You don't usually see the central centre-back engaging that high up, but he would. So in that initial build-up stage, Spurs were more than happy. I felt like their reading of situations as well was top draw. So let's just say if the ball was played over to Marquinhos and he looked to open up, Zaire Emery was maybe showing for the ball here. Bentancur would then track him as he was wont to do. And then let's say if that passing lane opened up for Kvaratskhelia, Bentancur would be quick to read that to try and prevent that easy line pass from Marquinhos up the field. He would be ready to jump from Zaire Emery and to cover that half-space pass if he needed to, making the interception and give Spurs a clearer attacking opportunity. Also, on the far side, you'd get maybe Pedro Porro coming into the half space. And the reason he would do that is because if PSG could quickly recycle it through Chevalier to then find an angle to play forward, they weren't cut open in the middle of the pitch or the half space with his positioning being caught too far out wide to Mendes, and he was still in a close enough position where he could make that movement and close him down if that pass looked available. So they had their zones and their angles covered excellently. Spurs, they did a fantastic job in these pressing stages. I thought it was a really, really well implemented press. Good physicality, good energy, especially in that midfield three. Palhinha, Bentancur and Sarr, I thought were excellent in these stages. Pedro Porro and Jed Spence coming up from deep on the two fullbacks, leaving the wider centre-backs on Barcola and Van de Ven. So it was brave, there were risk, but it was pulled off expertly. But naturally, through the fluidity of PSG, through direct play, they could get up the field and pin Spurs back. And how did that look? When Spurs' high press was beaten, when they needed to drop in, they did. They went excellently from that high press to their low block, transition between the two of them effectively and excellently. PSG will know what they're like. We know they haven't got such a set shape in the way they attack. It's fluid, it's getting on the ball, it's rotations. But you would get generally a back three with Nuno Mendes dropping in with Zaire Emery and Vitinha as the pivots. if a player dropped behind, or rather in front of Kudus and Richarlison to receive the ball, they wouldn't look to engage. As I say, they're worried about that central compactness from the striker line to the defensive line to make sure PSG couldn't gain ground in central areas. So Vitinha could drop in, try and play forward, and he would just have to try and penetrate what was in front of him, which wasn't a lot of space. You'd also get Dembele dropping in very deep and wouldn't be engaged by any of the Spurs defenders. They wouldn't follow him. The midfielders wouldn't engage, and he could then look to try and thread balls through, try and thread passes through space in the middle, or to the fullback or the wide player on the side. Let's just say if Kvaratskhelia could drop and he'd drag Van de Ven with him, because the wide centre backs would still look to press, and he could maybe look for that run for Hakimi and behind and try and find that. The issue is on the right hand side, Porro could get beaten, but I thought Danzo covered in really well. He got beaten a few times by Barcola, which is understandable because Barcola's acceleration is sickeningly good, but he did cover for Porro well. Van de Ven and Spence on the left-hand side is fantastic defensively. They've got pace and athleticism to cover those areas of the pitch and can duel well when in one-on-one situations. So as much as he found angles and found good passes in that area, Dembele, there was just a lot of defensive solidity for Spurs. Romero did a really good job, I feel like, of just combining all that together as well. I thought he did an excellent job as the central centre-back in this system, and it covered his athletic shortcomings really well as well. And even if it wasn't Dembele dropping in, if they tried to play around the outside, let's say Mendes coming in, and that back three could outnumber Kudus and Richarlison, you'd maybe get Palhinha trying to engage Mendes in this position to prevent him from having a clear pass through the middle. This would mean Danzo would have to come out and engage with Doué, and this was enabled because of the vertical compactness of Spurs, so there wasn't a lot of room to travel, so that if there was a threat of, let's say, Mendes playing this ball into Barcola and he could look to drive inside, there wasn't a lot of space for Danzo to have to recover into his position, for Palhinha to have to recover back. The Spurs weren't going to get carved open by any quick little movements and quick attempts at breaking them down. And as much as they did try to overload these wide areas, PSG, Mendes moving up with Vitinha coming over, the wing back on that side would get the support of the wider centre back and the midfielder on that side dropping in. So PSG couldn't really gain territory. There was no real numerical advantage, and Spurs had key zones of the pitch really well covered. The one-on-one threat of the wide player, that little inside the box channel with the wide centre back, and any pullbacks or maybe passes into the centre of the pitch, the holding midfielder could cover. So as much as PSG can kill teams in those areas of the pitch, Spurs did a really good job of preventing them from playing out for the most part. We'll get onto that in a minute. Also, if they tried to switch the plate, the wing-backs did a really good job of not allowing themselves to be pinned in on the far side. Sometimes you can get the back three, back five staying so deep they can't get out and get to engage with players. Whereas if they did try and spread the play, they tried to enact with quick passes through the middle and then get it over to the far side, let's say to Hakimi in this area, then Spence would read that well, intercept it, didn't allow himself to get pinned in too deep. They read situations fantastically and can get up the field. It is worth noting PSG didn't have much for pre-season heading into this game, so there was very sloppy moments, giveaways frequently, especially in that first half. It was just a very sloppy in possession display from PSG. It's understandable players that aren't clearly up to speed just yet after the Club World Cup. It's going to take a bit of time. And especially with the ball then maybe going back to Zaire Emery or back to the back three, if there was a counter-pressing opportunity, if it was a pass that wasn't placed perfectly, Richarlison and Kudus did a fantastic job of getting up against them quickly and trying to force turnovers, trying to just bring pressure. I thought they did their job really well. Some tireless work up there for the front two, but worked as hard as they could, back pressing, counter pressing, and they were the foundation, I guess, of what this shape was built on. Because if their first line of pressure, or if their first line of defence wasn't stable, then you could get Vitinha on the ball, you could get players dropping into this position in front of the midfield three, asking questions of him, and then it would just become an issue. Sarr was unbelievable in this area. He'd charge into the box to clear up any loose space. If a pass was coming through the wide areas and coming into the box, he would be so attentive to any dangerous opportunities in and around the box. His work was selfless. It was non-stop, doing the work of about two or three midfield players. It was a very N'Golo Kante display, covering space, clearing danger, and just putting his heart and soul on the line for the team. Where I felt like Thomas Frank got this wrong, I felt like his substitutions were really poor and he didn't manage the game well at all. PSG went attacking, they were shoving bodies on, they were causing chaos in and around the box. getting those wide overloads. Dembele on the right hand side was having Spence for dinner, getting angles where he could get crosses away or create chaotic opportunities in the box. As the game went on and Spurs were defending a lot deeper and just exerting a lot more energy, you wouldn't get the covering from Van der Ven, you wouldn't get Bentancur coming over. And so it was just a one-on-one duel with Dembele and Spence on that far side. The more Spurs brought it on themselves, the more desperate PSG got. And Spurs had some really good defensive moments in the box, like that last-ditch box defending. But you can only survive so many near-death experiences before you end up dying. And especially not bringing Brennan Johnson on, which I found really surprising. It meant that Spurs couldn't get out and couldn't get up the pitch in any way to just relieve pressure for a couple of minutes. It was strange how he managed the game. Thomas Frank, he almost got it spot on, almost. Bringing on Archie Gray for Polina, it killed a bit of physicality in the midfield as well. They felt like they were a little bit more vulnerable. But PSG causing chaos, it's not exactly tactical, but they created enough opportunities to benefit from. And when you keep knocking on the door, you keep persisting, you keep with that repetition of getting the ball in the box, forcing moments of madness, you get your results. And they're a good enough team with quality and depth to make the most of that. So fair play to them. They got their 2 goals and they got back into the game and they got it to penalties where they won it. In Spurs, though, when they would win the ball back, they would look to try and counter-attack through Kudus, carrying the ball up the field with Richarlison, making movements, exploiting space that's left by whatever PSG's rest defence was at that point. A lack of pace for Spurs to be able to break out with no real technical passer in that midfield to find any clever movements at the front two can make. It was all on that front two to carry up, not to get on the end of anything. So that was difficult. You know, Polina and Sarr and Bentancur are really good players, but they're not those technical geniuses that can carve a team open with their passing. Spence and Porro couldn't get up the field quick enough in transitional opportunities, and it meant that PSG could then get back into their defensive shape quickly without Spurs getting into any real dangerous or promising situations. They could win fouls, which was important for how they played with their set pieces. Vicario taking them on the halfway line, overloading the back post. They were hitting their crosses and their set pieces into the far post all game to then get the ball back into the box and keep it alive in dangerous areas, win first, second headers, and they got their results with 2 set-piece goals. A key aspect of how Thomas Frank's played throughout his time at Brentford, and it looks like he's carrying it over to Spurs. And when you've got the physical units in that side for Spurs, you'd be silly to not make the most of them. Simple values, really. Physicality, winning your duels, keeping the ball alive in attacking areas of the box, and you get your rewards. But when they would attack directly, there was weaknesses they did try and exploit from PSG, and it's some we've seen before. I'll go over it now. Weren't interested in playing short from goal kicks with Spurs. It was direct. It was getting the ball high up into the PSG half as quickly as they could. And they would try and... Oops, Vicario didn't kick himself up there. They would try and exploit Nuno Mendes, which we saw Chelsea do to fantastic avail in the Club World Cup final, exploiting his lack of aerial ability and his physicality. With Pedro Porro, they would go long to him a lot. They would also try and use Richarlison for their direct hits, for his physicality, for his work rate, of his ability to duel with defenders. But you would see them try and exploit that right-hand side, even with Porro maybe dropping in a little bit to try and force Mendes out, get him into even more uncomfortable positions where he could then look to turn inside and find Kudus or find someone to just exploit any space or make movements into space that could have been created through this action against Nuno Mendes. The biggest issue for Spurs is when they won these first headers, which they did quite a bit, because they had a physical advantage over the PSG midfield and the back line, is they didn't have the technical quality in that midfield or in the attack, bar Kudus, who can't do it on his own, to make the ball stick. And as a result, once the attack died down, if they couldn't win their set piece, then it just became hard for them to really exploit PSG. They just didn't have the quality on the day to be able to do it. That'll improve with the attempt to sign Eze, with the attempt to sign Savinho. They're clearly trying to address a technical issue with Maddison being injured for most of the season, with Kulusevski not being fit. So they didn't have that quality on show today. So they used the tools they had, which was going direct, using set pieces, and just trying to outwork PSG. And for the most part, they did. Just those small margins can cost you big time in a game against a team of this quality. But full credit to Thomas Frank. You can't fault the approach. at all. Didn't handle the game well, but this will be a massive learning experience for him. It's a different level when you're operating at Spurs as opposed to Brentford, and that's not me being disrespectful. That's just the different paradigms of the two clubs he's managing. But I'd love to know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments below. Cheers, lads. In a bit.